So for my glass demos, a series of short, hopefully short demos rendering a very clear glass reflective object. In this case, I've chosen this little guy here because it has some great characteristics of what we would like to see in a good render of glass, of very polished, clear glass. Number one, you can see we have a lot of edge detail all around the perimeter of the shapes. We have some really interesting and neat detail reflections of other reflections happening in the two legs, in the rear, in the back, in the neck area where there's like a little necklace or a collar. Then on the ear we have some deep reflections, and then we have these broad areas of slow changing tone with zero in the middle in both the head and the body. Nice little whip of the tail, same thing, a shaped tube turning over itself, showing those characteristics of how reflective shapes will travel around the object. So as I look at these shapes, they really do, they curve around. There are some variations. Some will do this though. This is a reflection from behind. That's why it's not following the contour of the legs. If this was a reflection from outside, you would not see this. If this was chrome, this would not be here. You would see something more like this, this, or this. And in here too, the inside of the ear is really acting like a little mirror, and it's picking up reflections of the head, of the other ear. And same thing here, the eyes look very different because they're also picking up reflections. So what I wanted to show, I've rendered into this so far, drew it up. You can still see some of my pencil work. And I wanted to say that you don't have to start a render the same way every time. There are different tactics you can use when you start a render. In this case, I wanted to show you how I actually started with mid-tones for a change, leaving the white, everything that's say 20 to 10 to 0, just unrendered. And I started with 30. Literally went around the entire piece and rendered wherever I saw 30. Then I added 70. And that to me represents my dark tone and my mid-tone, and the white of the paper is my light tone. So you can see I tend to break things down into 3 overall tones just to sort out complex areas like the ear. You can also see I've simplified so far, although I can reintroduce complexity as I render into this. But you can see, especially on the legs, my strategy was to actually simplify. I actually made it look like there's almost 3 legs, so I'll probably have to fix that a little bit, maybe knock this little segment back. But I've left open light areas, and what I'm going to do next is I'm actually, on this video, I want to resume rendering the large open area of the body. And so you can see I just took a blender. I'm actually re-wetting because this started to dry. And I'm just going to move my way across. At this point, I'm just filling area with tones, so I'm not worried about following contours. I just want to get the paper wet. When I get to an edge, though, I do tend to circle around so I don't smear the pencil. And having done that, you can see that's actually not quite wet enough. So that's why I left the paper. Let's get one more look at that. Getting better. But that's not totally wet, whereas this side is. But I'm going to switch to the 10. I think you've got it far enough that I can actually go in and start doing a blend. So big open area, you can see it here, blend from almost 70, 60 to 70 out to 40, 20, and 0. That's what I'm going to do here. And I'm going to blend on the other side a bit too, although there's a white edge there, so I'm going to protect that. And I'm going to come around with the 10, and just like the sphere we did, I start moving into circular strokes because I really want to always think about the contour that I'm rendering. And right about there, I will switch back to my blender because I'm developing a slight edge. Fix as you go. Wet into wet is what we call this, where you actually fix everything as the paper remains wet. And sequentially I start working down the tones. So that means the next tone is going to be a 30 in this case. Actually jumped a tone, which is okay. When you get more comfortable with the markers, you'll start jumping through tones instead of having to go through every single percentage, like 10, 20, 30, 40, 50. You'll actually use maybe 10, 30, and 50 to get where you want to be. So right there I can see I'm getting a little bit overworked on that part of the paper. You can see it's getting a little bit of a puddle underneath. So I'm going to actually stop there. And actually that blend is looking very good, so I don't want to overwork it. Go back to this side. And I'm currently using a 10. And now I'm going to actually work this area under the neck. You notice I'm not working this area, I'm just doing this one area. If I try to do both of these, my marker starts drying out. I get into issues. But I can go in here, for example, and just block that in. There's a secondary tone right there, so I can actually continue with that. And I'm going to stop right about there and just kind of work that collar on the neck a little bit. And you can see just in that few minutes, I've actually got the roundness and that inner glow of the glass starting that I talked about in the lecture. And the whole idea now, having established all three tones, is now it's about getting all the tones in between. So I've got 10, 20, and 30 established. Now I go back in. And there are no true whites in here. I left these white areas in the paper. They're actually more like 20 in there, so I can actually take this 10 and just keep blending over. And while I'm doing that, I'm actually going to go jump again, now to 40. That's not that big of a jump. And I'm going to strengthen this shape, just to show you how I progressively go in there. Now there was this weird little shape here. I actually streamlined that. And you certainly could render it absolutely the way you see it and do an awesome render, but like I say, I want to teach you not just how to recreate something photographically. I want you to learn how to assess a subject and to make decisions in your rendering that will make it read better. Because if, say, you are going into product design, if you're going into visualizing automobiles or any other product, you're going to be involved in the process of constantly changing, editing, manipulating imagery in any medium that you're working in, whether it's CGI or clay or markers, just constantly revising. And you're going to get revisions, as I've been getting on my 10 cars illustrations that I'm doing. And you got to learn how to constantly modify, change, and change from the reference, you know, to make it better than it is in the photo. Photos are usually not taken professionally. I've actually, with these 10 cars I'm doing, I'm actually working off of amateur photos because they're all classic cars. They're not studio shots. And as a result, the lighting is not always the best, and the angle is not always perfect, and there are things reflecting in the side of the car that I either have to get rid of or I have to add some reflections in to make things make sense. And you can see I just deepened this tone here, brought it out a little bit more, and I'm just going to keep working around this whole body area now with this, with a 40. And let's see it. I can let that white go away. Let that, it's actually probably part of the rear leg, which is incorporated into the body to make it push back. So here, I said that this segmentation on the leg was maybe a bit too much. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to knock this part back so it doesn't look like a separate piece. And then I'm actually going to probably leave that mostly white. And here I'm actually going to get rid of the white paper there, because if you look at my reference, which you can't quite see in the image, this is actually, there are almost no whites. The whites that are there are very tiny and slender areas of white. I could probably bring those back with white pencil, so I'm not going to try and protect all of those areas. just at this point, you can see, if you compare this head area with the body, this has a roundness, it has a glow. This did not, but you could see this. By the way, this could actually move into chrome. I could take this entire head render at this point and make it look like a chrome, because it really doesn't show that inner glow. But once you work that broad mid-tone, you're saying, oh, this looks suspiciously like glass, like something transparent, to have that much empty area. Plus the dark, really dark reflections, 70, 80, 90, very limited on the piece. If I was doing chrome, I'd probably pull a large, heavy, dark reflection like right down here. I'm not going to do that here, obviously, because I'm not doing chrome. But in terms of getting a little more detail, I am going to go in and now take a darker marker, which in this case is going to be a 70 again. And I'm going to deepen these tones. Just by doing that, I'm progressively increasing the contrast. And you know, the nice thing about the paper, when it's still wet, you have marker down, you can do, I'm lifting my marker, I can create those fades to nothing like that. And so that ends this first video.